Hi, everybody. This is Nate. Welcome to my channel. And I am really excited today to welcome Meike and to talk a little bit about her wonderful, intriguing, fascinating story. And it is going to be a little bit of an interview format. I know a little bit about her story, but not everything definitely. She has a YouTube channel that we will point to, but it is really more about what has happened to her, what she has discovered, and all the fascinating stories that she's bringing to this show. So I'm super excited and welcome.
Thank you so much. I feel so lucky to be here. And yeah, you are my first interview. So this is wonderful. And I really
Awesome.
like your work. I really trust your intuition. And so this is perfect. Really perfect.
I'm very honored. And so let's take a little bit of an introduction into your story and as it relates obviously to this house and who was in this house when you came in. So maybe Michael just walk us through the very beginning of that journey.
Sure. The podcast is called I'm Curious About George, and that is because during COVID, for 15 years before that, I'd been living in a historic landmark in Los Angeles. Really beautiful old trolley power station that had a lot of its own history. And I was just getting ready to sell it and sort of start a new life. I'm a single mom, so my son was going to go off on his own. And I was working very hard. And I sold it to a well-known actor who now is doing like a theater, and I think he produces out of there. His name is Alden Ehrenreich. I think he was Han Solo in one of the Star Wars movies. And so I was looking for a place to move to, and I happened upon this place. I actually saw it online, and then it disappeared. It went offline, and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" You know? And it looked mysterious and beautiful. And so, long story short, I came up here one day. It was very hard to actually get to see the place. And when I saw the place, I mean, you know that experience. I mean, it's like the hair goes up on your arms and you're just like, my real estate agent looked at me and she's like, oh my God. Like, I looked like I was about to start crying. And I was like shaking when I saw the place. And before I even walked in the house.
Well,
And
and was that, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious, was that when you
no, please.
were on the path or on the street? How early on did you get a feeling?
Driving up driving up the hill, excuse me, there's this house is on this beautiful hill, if not like a mini mountain, all by itself. And driving up that road, it's a rough road, and it just I was already getting it there, driving up that road, not even seeing, I'd seen some pictures of the place. And then when you see the first view of the house, I mean, the house is stone with like a tower in the front, like a stone tower. And you can see that on the first episode. I'm working on the second episode right now, which I hope to have out in a week. But you see pictures of this really unique house made, with a stone turret in the front, and then these huge wooden gates that are like, I don't know, 15 feet high. Just these, it feels very castle-like, as you can see with this fireplace. And I have a very big dog to go with it who's sleeping at my feet right now. His name is Lars. Um, so yeah, it was a very unusual looking place. And when I first looked through the window, before I even walked in the building, I literally felt like I had a vision of myself standing in one of the back rooms in the future. like I saw sort of the future me there, which was interesting. And then I looked at the house and it was full of stuff. It was really packed to the hilt with boxes, and the kitchen was like a hole, and it like lots of pieces of massive furniture. It looked kind of intimidating, actually, in some ways. Um, but you got the sense that, it was sort of in mid-animation that, somebody was putting their hopes and dreams here, and all of a sudden everything stopped, which is a weird feeling, you
Mhm.
know. Yeah, so
Did you know
yeah,
did you know ahead of time that there would be belongings in the house, or you didn't know?
I don't think I knew actually. Yeah, I don't think I was prepared for that. And you got a little bit of a backstory that the man had passed away, but you didn't really know. And they really didn't go, I don't think they really knew that much about him. Um, there was a person on site um, who, I don't know how to describe her. She had been sort of like a caretaker taking care of the property, and I think she really
Mhm.
wanted to stay and live here. And
Ah.
I think she wanted it. I think she never wanted to leave. And so when I saw it, they warned me that she was sort of hovering in the background, and that was kind of weird. Um, I didn't really know how to interpret that, and you could see she was angry. So
Mm.
that was interesting. And one of the things that you see when you're here, which is a really hard thing to describe, and I'm going to try and film it, but it's a little hard to film, is that there's all old warehouse windows all around the house. So um, you see when you look out the window, because you're on a mountain or a hill, you see birds flying by, and they're at great height. They're soaring, but they just fly by your window. So it's kind of like disconcerting because you feel like you're in a tower. It's really beautiful. There's such amazing bird life here. And I'm on the back of, very close to me is the California Condor Sanctuary. So, are you familiar with those birds? They're huge. They're
Yeah.
almost like a type of buzzard, but their wingspan is like fantastic. And they're strange gargoyle-like faces. Um, so yeah, so I took that in, and when I left, I actually cried driving down the hill because I was like, I'm never going to get this place. There's so many people ahead of me, and people that had more money, more probably influence, and maybe new people, whatever. Um, and I
But
just
Michael,
thought, oh my God.
it's interesting to me because you were describing the weird energy, the fact that there was this woman in the background. It's almost like you described some of the negatives as well when
Mhm.
you first went. And so you left the house with enough positives that you were interesting to get it. Did you have a feeling, sometimes you feel in love with the house or you get this instant connection. So despite those negatives, did you have that kind of, oh, this fits me very, very well, and why?
I felt it right away, and it didn't, I think with any great thing, you're going to have to climb a hill or have some
Mm.
battles. It's like love of any kind that, you have to, you're going to have to make some compromises or whatever that is. And I did feel that once before, and that was when I saw the building that I lived in for 15 years.
Okay.
And at the time that I saw it, I was a single mom. I didn't have much money. And I drove by this building and I was like, oh my God, I'm in love with an inanimate object. And I would look it up all the time. It was never for sale. I wrote the guy who owned it letters. Um, and everyone was like, Micah, there's no, what are you doing? It's so stupid. Um, and I ended up buying it. And it's like how I did that. It was very crazy and convoluted. I remember my father saying, you were taking so many risks. I can't even look. But I ended up buying it, and I had that same feeling like it was going to be a part of my life and my
Right.
history. And I think any building I've lived in a way, has become a part of my self-expression. That building, the Huron substation that I'd lived in prior, I had I was constantly building and fixing. I designed like an 8-foot chandelier that hovered over the main room that I had welded by someone. My dear friends, built a fountain in the back that was beautiful. And when you open these big doors, you just see this beautiful fountain. It was so much a part of my self-expression that I was actually a little surprised that I sold it because it was so tied to me. And I saw that too here. You could see there was land to tend to. There's a lot of work to be done. The place needed a lot of, work inside and out. And I knew that that was gonna, take something out of me. But I was into it. That's what I wanted to do, you know.
And you say you cried? You cried? You wanted to cry or you cried?
I cried. I cried because, it was COVID.
Yeah.
We were all so isolated then too. So it's not like you
Yeah.
could be like, hey, meet me for dinner or drink. I want to tell you this story. What do you think? What's your feedback? I mean, I could call somebody, but it was a very isolated time too. So I was very much, I felt like stuck in my own head and making decisions as such. And I thought it would be impossible to get this place. And when I left here, I was actually staying at a friend's house. She was traveling, so I needed a place to stay because I had sold my building. I was in the process, I was in escrow. And that night, I started meditating a little bit, like a couple of years before, and just to, as a way to anchor myself and focus and make decisions. And so that night I decided to just like sit back, like, what do I really want? What do I want to do? And this isn't an area even that I was thinking about living in. And as soon as I started doing that, this falcon ended up, this half man, half falcon, just like flew right through my meditation and was pointing at this land, just kept like flying and
In
pointing
your
and
vision,
pointing
in your vision,
in
in
my
your vision.
vision, but very like clear as day.
Yeah, yeah.
And and so I was like, that's weird. And it also kind of maybe gave me a little hope to not just, it wasn't like I was going to let go, but I did put an offer in on the place, and I was told it was a long shot. And then every day that I would meditate, that falcon man would show up. And I was like, this is weird. And every time he'd like come closer to the house, he'd point at things. At one point, there was I know this sounds so weird, but at one point, when I was meditating, there were all these falcon men, and they were like this with, on the driveway. And they were like shifting back and forth, and other people were trying to come up the driveway and they were like blocking them. And then I walked up the
Mm.
driveway and they just opened up for me. And I was like, oh my God. And at that time, they had rejected my offer. And
Oh,
I was like, okay, maybe this isn't over yet. And I had actually put an offer on another place that had been burned in the fires up here. So it was kind of a remnant of a place that would also require quite a bit of work. And I like to build and design things. So, that was a consideration. And and then when I had that meditation where the falcons were just kind of blocking for me, I was like, this is not done yet. So I pulled my offer away. And I said to my real estate agent, I was like, I feel like I'm in love with someone and I'm going out on a date with someone else. I can't, I can't do that. So let's let's not look at anything else until this is either sold to whoever, they accepted the offer on, or if I can still
finish.
somehow find my way into a crevice and pry it open. And so, long story short, I kept calling my real estate agent, who's this area is a very spiritual area. It's known as that. It's close to Ojai, California. It's known for a lot of spirituality. But my real estate agent really wasn't like that. And I'm not necessarily like that. And I kept calling my agent. I was like, could you call them again? Could you call them again? I'm having these like strong feelings like this deal's gonna fall through. And she's like, oh, okay, my God, I'll call them one more time. And so we went back and forth a little bit, and I annoyed the hell out of her, I'm sure. But she said to me, she's like, this is very weird. I've never felt more like a place belonged to a certain person. And I'm so sorry they didn't accept your offer because I really see you there. And I'm like, I feel the same way. So one day, about 3, 4 weeks in, I was meditating again, and I saw like all these falcon men flying over the property, and the hair on my arms is going up as I say this, and they're just swooping over the property, and I'm like standing below, and they release all their feathers, so it's like it's snowing white feathers, and it's like a celebration. It's like, New Year's Eve celebration, almost like that kind of vibe. And I'm like, deal fell through. Their deal fell through. I know it. I just know it. So I called my agent, and it was the morning. It was literally, I had just meditated, called my agent, my real estate agent. So stupid. Um, and and she's like, okay, one more call, just one more call. And I'm not even going to ask you why you think why you think their deal went through. And I was like, okay, we can talk about that later. Just call them. So she calls me back 5 minutes later, and she's like, are you sitting down? And I was like, their deal fell through, didn't it? And she's
Yeah.
like, it did. It just fell through. And they had gone through all their inspections and everything. So I said, I'll take the house with everything in it because they were going to clear it out. Tell them they don't have to take a thing out, they don't have to clean anything. You know, let's sort of re-engage. And I'll write them a letter, the inheritors a letter. And they accepted my offer like the next day. And that's how I got the place. So there was a lot of interesting intuition and feelings that brought me here. And go ahead.
No, I was kind of interested to know about the next step then, about coming in into the place.
Yeah. The next day that I came up, like maybe 3 days later, to kind of look it over again, kind of see what I had given away a lot of my stuff. I was living in this more like a warehouse where I had created this historic building where I had like a little side area for me and my son Anton. And I didn't have that much furniture. And what little I gave, then I just started giving all my stuff away when I sold the place. So I was pretty empty-handed when I came in. And so I came in, and I was just like kind of hit with how intense a feeling it was of someone else's presence and thoughts here. I mean, there were like 1,000 books, 12 Florida, oh, actually 13, 14. There were 14, 12, there were 14 floor to ceiling bookcases filled with books. They started out with religion, all these books on Christianity and the history of Christianity. And then they started going into magic. And I'm not talking top hat and bunnies. I'm talking like ritualistic magic. And then the occult, all these oracle cards, psychic phenomena, remote viewing, a lot of stuff on UFOs. I was just like, wow, this is really interesting
It's a
because I've been
library. It's a
having, and medium,
metaphysical library. Yes, a metaphysical library.
and massive, massive. So that already told me to some extent a lot about George, right? And then I also saw when you first walk in, he had very proudly displayed his PhD in divinity from a very well-known Ivy League school. And then he also had a pastor, like a minister's license on the wall. So that was interesting. It was a lot going on there.
Well, and you
And
mentioned
then,
The Christian books and the psychic books. So that's kind of a theme here of religious and spiritual deep practices.
yeah, it's like, how did he get from God to UFOs?
Mhm.
And is that connected? Is that separate? Is that compartmentalized? Or is it connected? And so, and this is a whole nother um, trail of thought. But in looking at the book, so in looking at doing episodes 2 and 3, I'm really kind of looking at the books in depth. And what's really weird, Nate, is that, and I'm looking at a bunch of books right now, so many of these books go into Blackwater. There's also the Mueller report, Blackwater, all this history of Russia and its oligarchs. And, you know, I don't know, like 1 + 1 = 2. It's very interesting because, George, I should have the year that he passed away. But it was probably um, maybe 2020.
Okay.
Um, and so he had had that first presidency of Trump's, not, and so he didn't see the second presidency coming necessarily. But yeah, it's very interesting. There's a really beautiful book. I think it's called The End of America. It's like, so now I'm sort of delving into just the thought patterns of the books and this sort of line of it's a really there's so much history here that relates to our present. And yeah, I'm exploring that. And to I'm trying to not make too many decisions about it, but just and let people do what they want with it as far as conclusions or you know what I mean?
Let's, of course, let's talk a little bit about the more surprising aspects that you found out within through objects or phenomenon, because obviously in this story you're just getting in, but I do feel that it's like the plot gets thicker and there's more activity coming through. And so can you maybe share some of the experiences?
Sure.
Yes.
Um, we've had a couple. So a lot seems to happen when I have guests, which I don't quite understand. I just had a bunch of people for Thanksgiving and everything was pretty normal, except I guess a can flew off a shelf. That was, I didn't see it. But so one of the things that was intriguing to me is that there was this huge painting. I call it the psychedelic rhino. And there was this huge painting of a rhinoceros that was in like really sort of bright, like pinks and blues. And this big painting. And I found that on my first day. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And then somebody told me that, there were vines painted all over the walls. And in this big room, the floor was painted almost like it was water, like it had green sort of swells in it and it had a little bit of iridescence. So it looked like somebody hand painted areas of the house for George. And somebody said to me that they thought maybe I asked his inheritor about the rhino painting. And that was his stepdaughter. And she said that she thought that painter might have painted the rest of the house with all those vines and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I kind of looked her up a little bit, and that rhino painting really stuck out to me as like a clue to something. And so I went into town with my sister, into Ojai with my sister, maybe a month or two later. And we walked into a shop, and there were all these psychedelic animals on the walls. There was like an art show in this shop. And I was like, oh my God, this is George's painter. It was this, and there's the same name. And so that's not too crazy. But so I was like, oh, that'd be fun to talk to her at some point. And this was before I was going to do a podcast. And but I was thinking about writing a book. Um, and so then about a month and a half later, I went in with another friend into town, and I walked into a store, into that same store, and the owner looks at me, and then another person looks at me, and they go, "Hey, Jessica, how are you?" And I'm like, "I'm not Jessica. My name's Micah." And then I'm like, "Who did you think I was?" And they were like, "Oh, this woman that had this gallery opening here about 2 months ago." And I was like, "Oh, you mean?" And I mentioned her name, and they were like, "That's who. Yeah, we thought you were her." And I was like, oh, that's really weird because I bought this house and I think she did a bunch of painting in it. And I have one of her paintings. Like, how weird is that? And then, like, just out of curiosity, I looked her up, and she was born in Germany, in a town probably about an hour away from the town that I was born in
Oh,
Germany. And we're about the same age, close in age. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So that wasn't anything solid, but these are the kind of like daily weird coincidences, like
yes.
this like synchronicity that just kept happening everywhere I went. Like I'd go, I was working on this house. I didn't have a kitchen for like the first year. I'd go hang out at this bar restaurant, and I'd meet somebody and they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I know that place. I met George and we did this." He worked on the watering system, the exterior watering system. But I had so much like synchronicity like that. And then one of the real estate agents, excuse me, said, "Well, you know that those windows, those warehouse windows in your house are from Skunk Works, right?" And I was like, "You're kidding me." And Skunk Works is a factory that was started by Lockheed Martin in, I don't know when they started. It was probably like maybe in the 40s. And it exists to this day. And that's where they do all their secret projects for the government. And a lot of people associate skunk works with reverse engineering of UFOs. And in the, very recently, there have been two, um, oh my God, what do they refer to them as? Congressional hearings where
Mm.
military whistleblowers discuss their
Yep.
experiences with now what they call UAPs. And they, in one of those most recent congressional hearings, one of the military says that they not only had pieces of a craft, but they had biologic material from a extraterrestrial. I don't know if he referred to it as an extraterrestrial. They just call it biologic. And that was housed at Skunkworks, which is where my windows come from, which is that's like a connection to the library, you know? And so there's synchronicity like that happens throughout the house. I've had when guests come and that's when there's not always, but sometimes some spiritual activity in the house. And often when you say the word George, or you say, okay, this fireplace, that the fire just went out, although
Mm.
I, I'm not going to work on that. I had relatives here and they were trying to start the fire and the fire wouldn't start. And, we all have that experience where, you tend to it over and over and you're blowing
Yeah.
at it and
Yeah.
it won't start. And I'd been outside on a phone call and all of a sudden I hear everyone scream in this room. And my nephew's fiance had been playing with the fire for 45 minutes and it was smoky in here and it wouldn't start. And she was like, what do I need to do? Call upon Satan to start this fire? And she
Oh.
was like, funny. And the whole thing went, they said the flame came up to here. And I didn't see it, but I heard them all scream. And they were just like, and then I came in and they were like, you will not believe what just happened. And while I'm sitting here, I'm looking at books on like the origin of Satan. And there's all these books on angels and Satan and things like that. I don't think this house is possessed in any way. I don't, just as a disclaimer, I feel this house has a really wonderful feeling to it. And yes, there is some kind of a presence there, but I don't feel like it's malevolent in any way. But I've had friends say that, in the guest bedroom, that in the middle of the night, they sense someone walking in, sitting on the edge of the bed divots. And then, as my friend described, she looked at the ceiling for 10 minutes, hoping it would go away. And then the divot went back up and left the room, you know.
Mhm.
I also, one more is that I had this woman who was an engineer come, and I had gone through, there were all these big pieces of furniture, and I found myself curious, and I could have thrown a lot away, sold stuff, but I was just like, what is going on here? This is so interesting. And so I went through every single thing. I went through matchbooks. There's hundreds of matchbooks here. There was this weird cabinet that had all these little drawers and it had business cards in all these little drawers. I went through all the business cards and then I kept a certain amount and I was like, I'm going to call some of these people. Why not? And one of the people I called was an engineer who had actually worked with George on something here. And after we had talked for a while, she's like, oh, I want to come up and visit you. And I'm like, okay, I'll make tea and we can chat. And so she came up and we had, a really interesting discussion about the property and then we kind of got into the conversation about George. And and as a joke, I was like, I wonder if George weed whacked that whole road going down because there's a lot of work to do, and I spent a lot of time weed whacking that whole long road up. And and so I was like, oh, I wonder if George weed whacked that road. And all of a sudden we hear, "Wee, wee." And do you know what a weed whacker is? I know you're in Portugal and you're French. Um, it's this thing that is supposed to cut weeds, and so it makes a loud noise. It goes neat, and it spins this little plastic filament that then like cuts through the weeds. And
Okay.
so in an area like this, that's a high fire zone, you have to really make sure like all the roads are like the sides of the roads are clear. And so it's a big thing that people do up here, and you have to take it pretty seriously. So I joked, I was like, I wonder if George did that. And then we hear reet, reet, and she's like, oh my God, what is that? And she's an engineer. She's like a pretty sober person. And George had a little hand fan that he must have maybe laid in bed with and, cooled his face on a hot day, or, it's a hand fan. And I had it lying on a counter. I'd never turned it on. I'd already been here like 2 years. And I must have been trying to figure out maybe what to do with it because I don't really use it. That's not something I would normally use. And that thing went on by itself. That fan, which very much replicated the sound of a weed
Wait,
whacker, just went on by itself and kept going on until I turned it
fair
off.
enough.
And she was like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." She's like, "I've never had an experience like that." So there's,
All
you know,
kinds of. Um, Thank you so much for sharing kind of, the experience of going into the house, getting to know the previous owner of the house, and switching now a little bit the conversation into your YouTube channel and podcast in terms of kind of what is your goal? What do you want to do with this? Um, do you want to share a story? Do you want to share your investigation? Because it could be seen as an investigation, um, and people following your step-by-step investigation, considering that I feel you're at the beginning of your journey, but you certainly have not finished your journey. So, do you want to take us, the viewers, along you in that journey? What how do you foresee this story?
oh, that's a really good question. And um, I'm leaving it a little open-ended. I know that I have an arc of telling this story about George and this house and like how weirdly wonderful and magical this experience is. It's also brought me into a world where I've started learning how to do tarot.
Mm,
I practice, I watch shows like yours and Linda G and stuff, and I'm, to an extent learning from how
yeah.
you read. And actually, I'd love to take a class from you if you teach, don't you teach tarot, don't you?
Yes, I actually some classes that are recorded, that people can take. I do some lives, but on my link, you can actually go
Oh,
and
nice.
do those classes online first. Yes. So yes, that's definitely possible. Um, so with this podcast and those different episodes, can you give us maybe a little preview of people who join your channel, subscribe, will get to see?
Yes. So in the first episode, I go into my backstory about coming from that historic landmark. I also strangely, and I have a weird relationship with buildings. I don't know what it is, but I lived in Julia Child's childhood home, and I accidentally gave birth to my son on the bathroom floor there. And I also lived in Deborah Harry's old apartment in New York. And these weren't things I looked for. I happened to find them out after the fact. And then there's some surprises that you'll hear about in episode one. I don't want to give it all away, but so we go into the backstory, and then just first, coming upon George's house and starting to go through his objects. In the next two episodes, I really want to explore this massive library. I'm also going to interview the book. There's a really incredible bookstore in Ojai. I think it's like the largest outdoor bookstore. It's just like this beautiful bookstore. And so the guy that runs that bookstore came and bought a lot of the collection here. And I wanted to interview him also, like on of what he picks up when he goes to estates and buys out whole libraries. And, I started exploring like famous people's libraries and what you learn about them, and like how there's sort of like a residual energy of a person through their books. And so I'm going to explore that in a couple of episodes. I'm also going to explore like if a house has an energy, a personality, and if that's something you can try and connect with. I'd love to work with someone who is a medium, who could maybe try and connect with the energies of the house and
Mhm.
of George, and maybe get a sense if there is something being communicated there. I often feel like I was somehow chosen to be here. I know that sounds presumptuous. I just think of Mike Johnson saying he's Moses for
I did. I
so
didn't expect him to come in this conversation at
yes.
all, but
But I don't want to sound too presumptuous. But I do feel that I was directed here in some weird way. And then I'm going to go into telepathy and the occult, and try and connect with the building and objects in the building and how it's changed my life. And it most definitely has changed my life and my trajectory. And I'll go also into how I'm like caretaking the land. So I become an agave farmer as well. And I'm growing vetiver, which I'll probably make scent oil from. And so I'm also, spreading out from the house, and working the land because the land had a big fire up here too. And so everything needed nurturing and growth. And then I'll go a lot into George's backstory and learning more about his experience. One of the things that I felt, my first night here, I slept in his bed. I had my mattress on it, but I slept in his bed surrounded by his stuff. And I smelled cigarette smoke that night,
Mm,
strangely enough, in the house. Um, is that I felt a sense of loneliness from him. And
mm,
um and I felt, and then I was like, am I lonely, or is he lonely, or is that like what am I picking up on? And there were areas where he starts and I begin, where he ends and I start. It gets a little blurred at times, and so I want to explore, his background and people that knew him. So I'm hoping to interview that woman that was his caretaker. I don't know how she would feel about being on this podcast. But I have a very close friend encouraging me to reach out to her because she had very strong feelings. And, I was just kind of scared of her because I don't think she wanted anybody to buy the house. Um, but so we'll learn more about George's backstory. And I went to Contact in the Desert this year, which is the largest UFO convention in the United States, I believe. And I think it used to be very like area it used to be very much like in the Nevada desert,
Mhm.
focused on that, sort of the legendary UFO crash. And it's burgeoned into this pretty amazing conference where military whistleblowers were there. There were all these people talking about AI, which is really interesting about how AI
Mhm.
connects with this like sort of potential disclosure of the UFOs, this government disclosure that a lot of people, and I guess it's starting to happen because the government has admitted that
Yeah.
that there is this phenomenon. Although nobody explained the all those drones in New Jersey, like that's still, a big question mark. But I went to that thing, Contact in the Desert, and I want to sort of really follow this UFO story because I think there's something there. I don't know what it is, and I have to interview more people to find out. I feel like this house has a connection, and
Hmm.
I'm following some clues. So we have spiritual activity, which I'll go into, and this UFO thing. My gosh, if a UFO ever needed a really great platform to land, it's on this mountain. Um, so yeah, so I'm gonna follow that as well. And I wish I was more prepared because I actually have the arc written down, and now I'm like, "Ooh," I'm a little
But
um
Mike, you're at the beginning of your journey with this. I feel like you have to kind of take in the fact that this is a journey where you don't necessarily know the destination, but more the path itself. I believe that there will be more phenomenons. I feel also that you are going to find in some of these books, I keep saying like documents that are going to pop in. And
mm,
I feel also because I've experienced that myself that sometimes with spirit, certain things appear, disappear, they're still here, but in a different physical plane. You're gonna start, really feel like you're gonna start to see some documents that are gonna pop up out of nowhere. I get the sense like you're really at the beginning of this journey, even though you have been on this journey for a while, obviously. But and yes, the topic of UFO seems to come through. Um, I I I would expect that at some point you are in direct communication with George also. So that would be something interesting to have happen. Um, so the way that I see you from a psychic perspective is it's the very, very, very beginning. And I feel like you will stay there for a while. And that's also why I feel like your channel is important because I see you as a documentalist and you will
mhm,
start to bring to the viewers, to the people watching, a lot more than a house experience. And I think this is where it gets really, really exciting. And you already know that. And so there's a lot to look forward to with this kind of experience. You're at the very, very beginning. I personally wanted to kind of share this with my community so that they can actually start, and me included, start to see your development with this story from as early as possible. Because I
mhm.
felt like there's a lot more, and it's so much more exciting when you start at the beginning of the journey. And so I can't wait to kind of see where this is taking you. Um, that I think it's also exciting not to know that.
It really feels like a treasure hunt.
Hmm.
It really calls upon within me that like little child that, came upon a treasure and little clues.
Hmm.
It's very childlike in a weird way. But I love thank you for what you said. I feel like you get the story, you get what I'm trying to relay. And also that, there's so many things in our daily life that we just walk past, that we don't notice or acknowledge that really like a that if you really take the time to look. I have found, by the way, I found some letters in books, and I found out about a love relationship from years
Hmm.
ago that was really interesting, which feels very voyeuristic, to read these things. Um, but yes, around every corner, I keep finding new and interesting things. And I'm actually dying to get into this library as my next chunk of work, because the theme is so strangely prevalent for this very moment. It's as you know what I mean? It's for what's going on right now on the earth politically. Um, it's so prevalent. And the timing, I got delayed a number of times. So this is another thing. I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but I had so many delays getting this first episode off. I got
Oh,
COVID, then I got bronchitis, then I got two ear infections. For 3 months, I had pretty much lost my voice. And I kept trying to record, and I'd be like, "Ugh," and record over and over again. Finally, I got the recordings, and 3 times my files got corrupted, and
wow.
I have to start over again. And then I was questioning myself, should I be doing this? Is this something I shouldn't, is this a sign? Maybe it was something to delay me till I was more prepared. And also, as it feels like the world is changing so quickly right now. Maybe this is the better timing right now because, it's aligned with some of the changes that are going on in the outside world. Um, so, and I'll discover that more as I really tackle some of these books. I'm just staring at them like there's so much on remote viewing, and secrets of the government. And, it's very fascinating.
Well, thank you. And
So,
we are getting to a close. The time really went fast. Micah, I wanted
yeah.
to kind of share a few things. Of course, thank you for taking the time to kind of introduce yourself and your channel and podcast. Um, I feel to what you were saying earlier with the delays and the challenges to get this started. I think you might want to think about going deep into the purpose of why you're doing this. And also, I feel like if I were to start this, I would have some sort of mental deal with George and says, I am coming through to honor you. And this is what the purpose is. So then you kind of get the blessing, more than the blessing, actually, the support ahead to carry the message. I feel like that's what he wants. He wants you to carry his message. And so the educational part, I think it boils down to the educational part, the documentation, and letting the world know more about those intricacies. And so that I think could be very, very interesting. Um,
I think that's really well said. And I agree. And I think I'm gonna do that this week. I think that's sort of been bubbling in the back of my mind, and I think I should tangibly do that and connect. And also it's a trust thing, you know. It's I'm not gonna take this information and go rogue with it, you know.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate you being here. I will put the channel information on the description and on the notes of this channel. Uh, Thank you so much, and well, looking forward to see your expedition.
Thank you so much. I can't even express how appreciative I am, and I am a fan of you and your work, and I will continue to be, and we will be in touch. Maybe we'll have more to say in the future. And thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
so appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone.